Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Breaking Methods webinar series. I'm Ash Watson, a sociologist and postdoctoral fellow with the Vitalities Lab. I research digital technologies and I work with qualitative and creative research methods. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about a methodological technique I designed which brings together more traditional mixed methods research processes with some insights from arts-based research. This is called the methods braiding technique. This is for people who want to bring creative methods into a project, and for people mixing, for example, multiple qualitative methods. In this webinar, I'm going to give a general overview of the technique and explain how I've applied methods braiding in a recent project of my own. I've published about methods braiding in sociological research online. As I detail in this article, mixed methods approaches are really prominent in social research, and increasingly people are looking to incorporate creative and arts-based research practices into their methodological toolkits. But advice for researchers who want to employ creative and dynamic approaches seem to me to largely speak to people who are already well versed in complex mixed methods work. Arts-based research is also largely absent from these methodological discussions. Even in some of the most cutting-edge social research methods texts, arts-based projects and mixed methods approaches are discussed as separate things. Very limited work focuses on overall project design and processes for using creative practice in mixed methods projects. So the methods braiding technique is a practical scaffold for researchers wishing to systematically undertake mixed methods research with any combination of quantitative, qualitative, or arts-based methods. Methods braiding should assist with the incorporation of arts-based methods into a broader project and advance existing mixed methods approaches with some insights from arts-based research. There are 4 core elements of the methods braiding technique as summarized in this table here. Number 1 is that it has a phase-based design. In this technique, methods are mixed simultaneously in phases and sequentially across phases, and no single method is privileged in one particular phase. Number 2, methodologically, mixing here is an iterative and fully integrated process. This means that each method informs how the other methods are directed and approached across the phases of the project, and data are integrated in analysis and for interpretation. Doing this, a material and a temporal co-influence is sought. Number 3 is what I've called the directed pliability of the technique. This was a really important quality for me in the project example that I'll speak to next. Methods braiding offers a structured and creative experiential approach. The integration I spoke of in point 2 takes an unfolding, adaptable, and contextual style. And to achieve this, methods braiding stresses the importance of a research diary and recommends taking an exegetical writing model in this, which I'll talk a little bit more about soon. Finally, number 4 is the technique's process orientation. Now, all methodological techniques are concerned with a research process in one way or another. Methods braiding has a reflexive, synergistic, and output-oriented process, so it has built-in periods for review and centers the creation of outputs, including arts-based products, throughout the research project as a whole, rather than as something that happens only at final stages. To do methods braiding, first you want to determine your research problem, research questions, and rationale. Second, consider the aims and intended outcomes of your research, what you hope to achieve, who the research is for, and how the results and research significance may be best communicated. Third, determine the methods best suited to understanding the research problem and addressing your research questions. Fourth, consider how the selected methods may operate together. Outline the paradigms and concepts they engage, as well as what is required for their individual and collective employment. Once these aspects are clearly outlined, construct a research calendar. You want to segment this into a series of major research phases for data collection, followed by review periods. This is a period where data collection ceases for reflection, evaluation, and analysis. Designing in this periodic review works to bring some of the key benefits of doing a pilot study to the bigger project. It's a dedicated period to assess and tweak how the methods are braiding together. The bar here is an example of the phases, with research in green and review in blue. Something to also prepare is a research journal. Throughout the project, you should consistently detail your experiences and insights in a similar way to an artist writing an exegesis. An exegesis is a critical explanation of creative work that often illuminates and justifies the production process. So in methods braiding, the research journals should be focused on the research process and used as a central space for reflexive and analytic work. As you're setting yourself up to start data collection, remember that methods braiding is for simultaneous and sequential data collection, so a single phase should not be dedicated to a single method. You want to be able to employ all of your methods in each of your research phases. Then, as you move through the project, you might make minor tweaks during a research phase, but more major adjustments in approach and focus are something to make during review periods for the following research phase. It will depend on your project how many cycles of research and review are appropriate and how long these phases should last for. In my project, I used 3 cycles. The review in particular should be long enough that this reflective evaluation can be fully conducted. The review period and the intensive writing practice of this period is an essential component of the technique and really essential to successful methods braiding. With each review period, the methods should be further refined and further intertwined. So as you go through the project, the emerging relationships and co-influences between each method should be something you recognize and focus on. Once you've completed all major research phases of data collection, your focus can more fully turn to your intended research outputs. To give you an applied example of methods braiding, I'm going to briefly speak about a recent project of mine. I was interested in exploring what fiction could bring to the craft and public project of sociology and contribute to what Furedi calls the task of assisting the influence of the sociological imagination in society. Focusing on fiction, I wanted to find out how and why we should engage people in sociological imagination. This was a practice-based exploration, so I looked at how people used art to do public sociology. I investigated what some of the contemporary sociocultural limitations are to doing this kind of work well, and I also created a major creative work myself, a novel called Into the Sea, which is pictured here. This has recently been published by Brill in their social fiction series. My focus overall was on what C. Wright Mills calls the promise and cultural meaning of sociology. Theoretically, I drew together contemporary cultural sociological work on meaning making with literary theory on narrative structures, and I also drew on the work of Spinoza on affect and relationality. In this project, I employed autoethnography, literature analysis, and fiction writing as an arts-based research method. My aim as a whole was to explore the existence, the lack, and the potential of sociological thinking through fiction. I did not employ these methods to triangulate or cross-check my data to better substantiate an argument about public sociology. What I aimed to do was dynamically integrate data and creative practice via my methods in analysis and through the novel itself. In order to do this, I wanted a methodological design that offered a structure for experimenting with how to integrate my methods and data. I braided these methods together across 3 major research phases. These followed a pilot study that I used to test and decide that these were best suited for my research questions and aims. I wanted to identify an effective way of doing creative public sociology, and I wanted to create a novel that would engage the kinds of young people I was teaching at university at the time, to show them how thinking sociologically works and what the importance of this is in their lives today. Each research phase lasted approximately 9 months, and review periods lasted an average of 2 months. Across and during the research phases, each method actively informed and shaped how I employed, analysed, and interpreted the others, as the movement and shading of the strands in the picture here shows. Themes from the autoethnography informed the development of the fiction narrative and directed the focus of the literature analysis. The fiction shaped the autoethnography and the literature analysis, which in turn directed what I aimed to understand in the autoethnography and illuminate with the fiction. To give an example, in Phase 1, my literature analysis focused on how contemporary scholars make sense of and apply the sociological imagination, what social issues and examples they highlight. Meanwhile, I structured my autoethnographic observations around Mills's idea of being a biographical entity, trying to identify some key experiences that socially mark late youth as a life stage today. Then, in Phase 2, I constructed the plot of the novel based on the key themes I developed from this literature analysis and autoethnography of Phase 1. Another example, with the arts-based research in Phase 1, I worked on developing characters and figuring out how they would make sense of our world. Then, thinking about who the fictional characters were, with my Phase 2 autoethnography, I observed and detailed some of the ways that individualism shapes how we think about ourselves and our relationship to social norms. At the same time, my Phase 2 literature analysis examined how the long development of individualistic thinking shapes social spaces today, our schools, our workplaces, our homes. Then, following this, in Phase 3, these insights became the basis for the overall aesthetic form and the pace of the novel. As I explored in this project, there is a generative relationship for public sociology between that core focus of Mills's sociological imagination, the relationship between private troubles and public issues, and the way narratives can effectively knit the local and global together, and the kinds of elements that fiction writing in particular centers, like a depth of characterization, the power of metaphor to unsettle common sense connections or ways of making sense of things, and the value of different narratorial modes and perspectives from which we can tell a story. What methods Braiding helped me to do in this project was dynamically bring arts-based research into a sociological research project, cultivate a co-influence between these methods and the data they generated, and center the production of outputs, which was essential in this practice-based study. The overall key benefits of methods braiding are, firstly, its approach to reflexivity and periodic review, building review periods into the project design and centering the use of an exegetical research diary. Methods braiding aims to help researchers review their methods mixing and cultivate reflexivity in a practical way. Second is the synergistic integration which this technique can help cultivate through the sequential and simultaneous mixing of methods across multiple phases. Most methodological techniques are designed for one of these kinds of mixing, but I think there is something really valuable to be achieved with both, especially in projects that include arts-based research. Third is the centering of research outputs, both traditional and creative, by recognizing this work as a central part of the project, as arts-based researchers do when they think about production. Here are a few readings which are really useful for me in designing methods braiding. I really recommend looking at the full list of references that I've cited in this article though to get a good understanding of mixed methods research and contemporary developments in arts-based research. Thanks for listening.